Hello, everybody. Come on in and find your seat. All right. Well, welcome. This is our journey to include people with disabilities in our user research. My name is Jill Mugge, and I am on the Hilton Accessibility team. Welcome. And I am joined here by my amazing colleagues here, Cali White and Darby Siscoe, who's taking pictures for us. We're super excited to have you here today and to share our journey with you as we have been working on a project here to include people with disabilities in our user research and formalize that program, as well as include it in all of our research. So today, first what I want to do is level set on accessibility. How many folks here are familiar with accessibility? Do you work with accessibility at all? Good. Oh, excellent. All right, we got smart people. All right, we might have to run through some of the level setting then. Oops, sorry. So we will just go through a couple different level settings, and then I'm going to talk about also why this is so important to Hilton, why we've invested in this, and to share with you sorry, these things are moving. Okay, there we go. And then finally, I'm not doing that. Okay. And then finally, Cali and Darby are both going to talk about our user research. They're going to talk about some use cases that we've used to really explore all of our research, and then talk to you about actually building the program and formalizing the program. And of course, then we'll leave some room for questions behind or afterwards. All right, let's get started. So, level setting. Has anybody seen A11Y, A11Y? Everyone's seen that term before. Does anybody know where that came from? Now that you see the slide. Okay. So accessibility, or A11Y or A11Y, is a numeronym, and that represents the 11 characters between the A and the Y. So accessibility, you're going to see that a lot in any time that you're around accessibility, and it makes it so handy when you write out the word accessibility as many times a day as I do. So we use that quite often. The other acronym that you're going to see quite a bit here is people with disabilities, and that's a capital P, lowercase w, and capital D is people with disabilities, not to be confused with a Portuguese water dog, capital PWD. And that is my Portuguese water dog, Augie. Any opportunity I can get to share my fur babies. All right, so there are two main learnings that we had in the last few years that we've been using people with disabilities in our research. And that is the difference between researching the disabilities, so we're disability focused, versus technology focused. That was a big learning for us as well. So when we talk about disabilities, we're talking about visual, like low vision, no vision, color blindness, auditory disabilities like hard of hearing, deaf, mobility, cerebral palsy, MS, limb differences, and cognitive, like dyslexia, or ADHD, or people that are maybe on the spectrum. Now, people with disabilities, to interact with digital technology, so digital accessibility, they use particular technology to access these the technology that we have. So is everybody familiar with screen readers? Yes. Okay, so screen readers literally read the screen for people that, well, most folks are using it because they can't see the screen. But what we've learned is that not all people that are visually impaired use screen readers. So cognitive dyslexia. So what we found is that when we are looking for people to join our research panel, we're looking for people that are with their disability and not the type of technology that they're using, because it's not specific to the particular disability. So two very different experiences if you can't see the screen versus if you're using it for something like dyslexia. Or myself, when I just get lazy or my headache hurts and my eyes get tired and I just need some help with that. Sorry. Voice recognition, same thing. Browser zoom is we're zooming in, so not always the same technology for disabilities. The second thing that we want to point out here is, down here on the screen is the stages of the development life cycle. And when we talk about accessibility, a lot of times we're talking about the world of compliance. So where we're making sure that the technology is accessible through particular global standards. So yes, we do that. And yes, we use people with disabilities to get some of that feedback. But what we've done here with my research colleagues is we've pushed this up the funnel here into the ideation phase. So we want to shape our technology based on what our feedback is from our people with disabilities. Perfect. I keep hitting it. So this is an important aspect because as we were going through this research, we were finding lots of people in that compliance phase, but not a lot of people were in that research phase, and that's really important to us. So, all right. Now, why? Oh, goodness. Sorry. So why are we invested in this? Why are we even, how did we get so much buy-in with Hilton? The first reason is that we promised. Hilton has made a customer and team member promise that to be reliable and friendly and inclusive experiences. And this really, for the three of us, is really the heart of what we do. This is our big why. This is why we do it. Now, it's not always, it's a feel-good, but it's not always where you get leadership buy-in. So, second reason why we're highly invested is we're also mitigating risk. We talked about compliance, but can we stave off the issues before we get to production? So we have to. We have a legal obligation to make our technology accessible. So that's the second reason. Again, a good reason why leadership would buy in, but not necessarily the real needle mover. The real reason we get such good buy-in is it's really, really good business. 3 areas that we've landed on and have sold into leadership was, number 1 is it drives loyalty for us. Number 2 is it propels innovation. And number 3 is that it taps into emerging markets. So let's explore this a little bit further. Part of our good business is driving loyalty. What we've found through our own analytics is that, I'm so sorry, I keep hitting this. There we go. Visitors who shop for an accessible room, so there's 3 types of accessible rooms: mobility, hearing and mobility rooms. So when folks on our site are shopping for accessible rooms, they are 5 times more likely to book. We're interpreting that as being high loyalty. The other thing that we learned is that almost half of the people that are booking these accessible rooms are actually our highest tier loyalty members. So that was a little shocking, I guess, information that we learned as we were diving into the analytics. So, good business because it drives loyalty. Number 2 is that it propels innovation. Is everyone familiar with the curb cut effect? Yes. So the curb cut effect is where you are, you've created something, you've invented something for someone with a disability, and it becomes so useful that it has been integrated into everyday life, and now you don't even think twice about whether it was built for a person with disability, such as a curb cut, which is the little ramp that goes from the street onto the sidewalk. Obviously for us, we're all lugging our luggage to the front door of a Hilton, and so we become very familiar with how that's become very, very helpful. And in some longer presentations, there's some really amazing stories that as simple as a curb cut, and the next time you walk over one, there were people in the 70s that were fighting and almost dying to get the curb cuts, fighting local city governments just to get this little cut in the curb. And so today we don't even really think about that. But there's a whole list of other examples of products that have been originally created for people with disabilities and have just sort of moved straight into common everyday life. All right, the third reason, emerging markets. The accessible travel industry is huge and it's growing. In the US, Canada, and UK, that accounts for $13 trillion in disposable income. So that is a lot. The actual travel market, and this is just in the US, you can see where it started in 2002 at about $13.6 billion was spent on accessible travel, and that was people that identified as having a disability, so they were self-identifying. Until 2022 is the last research that's sort of out there right now, and we're looking at $58.2 billion that's being spent in accessible travel just in the US. So it's much, much larger. So these are the three reasons why we have so much buy-in from our leadership, because we were able to create the real reasons why we do it, and we were also could also show a real business case for this. This matters. So I am now going to pass it off to my friend, Cali. Go ahead, take it away.
Okay. All righty. Thank you, Jill. Hi, everybody. I'm Cali. I'm one of the research managers at Hilton, qualitative research specifically. So now I am going to talk a little bit about user research, kind of who we are, where we fit into the digital experiences at Hilton. So on our research team, we live in a team called Experience Design. So we are, we kind of touch all of the digital experiences that we have at Hilton, whether it's for a guest or for a team member. So in the user research box or corner of this box over here, we have us, Qual, and our experimentation team. In design, we have our UX and our UI designers. We have our content designers, and we have our accessibility specialists. So we kind of call ourselves four-headed, five-headed monsters because we all work together internally, but then we also all work with our stakeholders. But our stakeholders all see us as experience design. So it gets a little muddy at times, it gets a little difficult sometimes, but yeah, we're kind of just the five-headed monster on a lot of our projects. So question first, how many researchers do we have in the room? Okay. How many designers that also do your own research? Got it. Okay. So more of those. How many of you, when you're working with stakeholders or project teams, have difficulty kind of explaining what your role is or when to bring in research and do that and kind of explain and talk through processes? Wow. Well, yeah. Few of you. Okay, so I'm asking these questions is because we struggle with that as well. So if you have like the magic potion, come talk to us after. We would love to talk about, how your ideal perfect process works. But at Hilton, what we found was we've had these conversations over and over with stakeholders new to Hilton, ones we've worked with for a while, and we have a hard time like really getting it to resonate. What we do, when to bring us in, how you work with us. So One thing we do find that's worked pretty well is we talk about, we are the ones that really want to investigate our end users, whether that's a guest or a team member, really understand their requirements, their mental models, their expectations, and then we try to meet business where they're at. So we take those business needs, apply the insights that we collect from a research perspective, and create that experience that ultimately makes people really happy. So also, when we do start working with stakeholders and we actually, do the work, and then it finally clicks of like the value we bring, but it is something that we have to constantly talk about and keep iterating on with all of our stakeholders. So another thing too that we feel like clicks is really our goal is to de-risk all of the experiences that we launch at Hilton. So it's really risky to just put something out into production and just hope that it works and hope that users want it, right? Well, that's where we come in. We really want them to understand like why they should listen to us, because we want to build an experience that people actually like, that they'll actually use. So that's where our team and experimentation team really comes in and tries to add value. So now I'm going to get back to why we're really here. So our inclusive research journey, where we started. So I joined Hilton about 7 years ago, and as a qualitative researcher, I was not thinking about people with disabilities and like how to just do my research day to day, week to week, and stop before every test and say, hey, I need to include people with disabilities. I really didn't even know how to do that, how to start, how to recruit for that. And so we got to a point, a little over a year ago where we had to start thinking like that, to all of the points that Jill mentioned earlier. Our day-to-day research just did not include people with disabilities. When we did start on this journey, we realized how difficult it is. Recruiting takes a lot of time. Before every study, we've got 13, 14 qualitative researchers that are cranking out 1 to 2 tests a week. How do we expect them to just spend all of that time recruiting for people with disabilities to ultimately that might slow things down? So how do we do that? Also, it was really expensive. When we did recruit manually and partner with someone to help us, we realized how costly it was, and we knew this was just not sustainable. So since we started, it's been a long journey, but we are still there. If you're on this journey, we are with you. If you've completed this journey, we applaud you. Come talk to us after. Again, tell us what's really worked. But anyways, so since we've been on this journey, when we started and kind of realized all of these things, we kind of paused and we were like, okay, this is not sustainable. How do we kind of pause, figure out what our goals are, and how do we move forward? So along with a few of those things that we just talked about, we had a few case studies that we just kept running upon, and there's a couple of them I want to highlight today. So call center study. We had this usability session with a non-sighted agent where we brought in a call center. So when you call Hilton hotels, so if you call Hilton Miami, the person that answers the phone is not at the Hilton Miami. They're in their living room in New Jersey. Like, that's just not, it's a typical call center. So we brought in this non-sighted agent and to the call center that we have in Dallas. And we had stakeholders that led this project, that have been on this project from day one. And the power of observation, getting all of those stakeholders in the room to observe this agent try to this system, it was super powerful. Ultimately, the system we had was inaccessible, not only just all of the boxes that, you have to check to be accessible, but just watching him try to get through this experience, learning from him, listening to him on what an accessible experience, like that he needs from it, that he really wants from it, hearing experiences of other accessible experiences was super powerful. And I think that definitely, shifted everyone's mindset in the room of like, wow, like, yeah, this is not okay. Like, we have to do something about this. Another case study we had was pets. So all of our Hilton hotels now are pet friendly, and we were doing research to get to this point, and we included a couple studies with service animal owners and their travel experience. So everything we're doing now is digital. We want to get people in our app. We want to, pursue this digital experience. Less time, people come into the front desk, the better. But what we learned when we were doing research studies with these service animal owners is, they have to stop at the front desk because they have a service animal. They have to check them in. They have to complete paperwork, which also invites the questions of really validating, is this a service animal, which is not legal. So we had a lot of learnings from this specific research study that, this experience for service animal owners was very unsatisfactory. And we also had to, from the team member perspective, we had a lot of educating we needed to do to make sure that our service animal owners were getting the same welcoming and experience that we promise at the company at Hilton. So yes, a lot we learned from these case studies, along with a lot of other ones, but we knew we had to do something and we had to include people with disabilities from the very beginning in research and not just from a compliance perspective. So, outcome from these and others, we had a huge shift left. We have now really started to include people with disabilities, and Darby is going to dig into how we have done that so far.
Awesome. Thank you. So let me talk to you a little bit how we got here and how we landed on our framework. So as Cali was kind of mentioning, we had to look at what were we really missing. One of those things was facilitating with confidence. We are lucky, we have a very mature team of researchers, but when it comes to interviewing people with disabilities, what are best practices? What are things that are okay to say or not say? Things like that would increase our confidence in doing that. A more effective partnership between us and our A11Y partners, that was really a big miss that we wanted to work on and formalize so they know how to collaborate. And then lastly, of course, recruiting. How do we recruit these people? How do we find them? And how do we build a panel so that we can continue our iterative style of research and not slow anything down? Hello. Okay, so how did we fill those gaps? We did a research pilot to start with. We called in a friend. We worked with an agency to really focus on teaching us by doing a pilot. So we got to watch them moderate and do things like that. Got lots of learnings from that helped us set up how are we going to set up our framework and what are the expectations for our researchers. That partnership I was talking about between us and A11Y. So how can they help us? What is their role in research? We have a process where it's kind of nice. We align on objectives first, but then our researchers really own the rest of the work once they get that alignment from their stakeholders and their team members. So how do we really incorporate and formalize how we partner with our A11Y? And then lastly, of course, we're going to keep harping on this one, recruitment. We learned from this study, how are they actually finding these people? Where are they going? Are they going to organizations? Is there a place already that exists where we can find a central hub of people with disabilities? So first off, I want to talk about the pilot just a little bit. So overall, the goal of the pilot was, of course, to learn how we can improve our booking flow, but also help us achieve our long-term goal of a robust, inclusive research program. So what I'm going to do is just play this clip. This is an example of some learnings, like just what we got to watch happen and hear just within our booking flow. Playing.
Typing to filter results.
So I was hoping that there would be, and there is a form on the page.
City, state, location, or airport. Combo box. List box pop-up. Required. Select. Where to. Begin typing to filter.
All right, so these are things our research team is not really that familiar with. They're not familiar with screen readers, something we learned out of this pilot. So we got to hear, what are people who are using screen readers doing? What about people who use other types of assistive technology that might have motor disabilities or other disabilities that require an assistive tech? So what did we learn? We learned a lot. The first thing we learned was the importance of technology setup. And this was one area where our A11Y partners could really help us because they understand, all the different types of assistive technology can help us run through setup and make sure that there are no issues that we're going to run into with the test. Of course, also, they can help us understand what are some known issues, especially with screen readers that we know might get somebody hung up, so that they can help us when we need to interject. Screen reader effectiveness. So actually, since this is something we learned, is like, maybe we could start looking at how effective are our alt text. How is it chunked properly? Does it make sense in the order? Like, these are things we hadn't really thought about to ask before. The relationships with our users, like how do we continue to build that loyalty and make them feel like Hilton cares? We learned a lot in this study about how and I'm gonna have a clip at the end actually, how this really impacts them in their booking experience and their desire to travel. Script building. So this is what we really learned from our pilot was a lot of what we know already that applies to script building, and there wasn't a lot of differences. And this is again where we could lean on our A11Y partners. And of course, the last piece of this is the actual partnership. What we learned was they can help us identify who are the right people to recruit. We're doing agile studies, so we're really focused. So who of these disabilities is maybe going to struggle the most or is going to be impacted by this the most? And we look to our A11Y partners to tell us that. And again, on script building. So we used to not really show scripts to anybody, so what we will do is run it by our A11Y partners. So they can tell us, hey, this phrase right here, maybe not the best thing to say with this group of people. So what are some outputs we also got from this and that we're going to continue to update? One of those are personas. So this is really exciting for us. We now have personas that are used by our design team that incorporate people with disabilities. And as we continue this program, these personas are living documents. So we now understand more about their mental models. And like Jill said, less about the technology and more about how they think and how that, and they may use varying technology. Maybe we'll learn, people who are dyslexic use screen readers that we didn't expect before. So this allows us to be a little bit more broad and help our designers design for everybody. Creating the user group. So actually, we have started recruiting and we are building a panel. And within the last year, we've gotten over 100 people. So in doing this pilot, we really learned who can we ask and how do we recruit? Because we wanted it to be broad enough that we weren't excluding anyone. And we also learned that people with disabilities may not necessarily identify as having a disability. So how do we include them in the panel as well? Because their experiences also are going to influence our technology and innovation. Hello? Okay, so we're not done though. So we built the panel, we started building the panel. What else of the framework did we need to do? So now our XDR, that's what we call our XDRs, our researchers as experience design researchers, so that's what the XDR means. And they are, like I said, they're partnering and including accessibility in the research plans and the development of objectives. We did our pilot, we had the personas. So now what? This year, our goal is to increase this panel from 100 to 500. And the reason for that is so that we're not constantly doing research with the same people over and over again. As you heard Cali mention, we have about 14 researchers, and they're cranking out 1 to 2 studies a week. So in doing that, we need to make sure we have enough people for them to recruit for. And then finally, the formal program is that every study includes 20% of all testing participants are people with disabilities. You may be wondering why. And the reason for that is we looked at the data, roughly 20% of the population has a disability or identifies as having a disability. So that seemed like a really good starting point for our researchers. And within a small study, they're doing research with 10 to 12 people. You really only need to find 2 to 4. And that made it a little bit easier and didn't slow our process down. So the last thing I want to close with is really our why. So we're doing all this. We've taken all the time to build this framework and really solidify, this is what we need to do. And this video really, I think, captures it. Even the smallest thing that you can do for someone with a disability or anybody that makes them feel understood, heard, and appreciated is going to go a long way and help us deliver on our promise.
Studio, so I'm going to look at that one and book from 146. Oh, that's really nice. It says this room is designed for guests with disabilities. If you need these features or there are no other rooms available, Please proceed. Otherwise, select a different room. That is very nice, I will say.
So we appreciate y'all coming. Hopefully this helps you think about how you could build a framework within your own company. I realize like we had a really good launching point, but hopefully this journey will help you think like what pilots can you do, what studies can you do to get buy-in as well, and then actually use that to build your own framework that works for you and your team. Thank you. Oh, sorry. One last thing, actually. If you would like to join our panel, or you know anyone else that would like to join our panel, you can scan this QR code and fill out kind of our broad screener, and you will be able to see in action how we've written things, how we're phrasing things, and help us continue to test our digital experiences. Now, thank you.
And feel free to pass this around to friends, family, anybody that you know. As we've said, we've got lofty goals this year to include and grow our panel. So, all right, any questions for us? I'm getting in.
Hi. So it was great hearing a bit about your journey and your framework. I'm really curious to know a bit about like what sort of hiccups your team faced along the way, how you overcame them. Like what were some of like the main like blockers in terms of making this process work?
Are you a researcher or in accessibility?
Researcher, UX researcher.
Say one. The first one that comes to mind, I think, is all of the manual. Keeping up with some of these things manually is the hardest part when you get in your day-to-day and you're cranking out these studies and you're like, oh, I need to go back and look at, so for example, we're screening for 20% through one of our platforms, usertesting.com. So we have to go back and add those folks that identified to the panel that we're building. And so I think that's just one thing, is kind of making sure that we're doing, keeping up with those manual tasks that we've identified that we have to do to get to a sustainable state. So I think that's the first thing that comes to mind for me, and just remembering to do some of those things.
I think also just the training, like the overwhelming feeling of how do I do research with assistive technologies that I'm not familiar with, especially like when you think about a screen reader and like, you heard that clip. This is like, if you're not used to it, you're going to get into there with somebody and they're going to have we want them to have their screen readers on their normal, whatever they do. And it's going to be really fast. And you're just like, wait a minute, how does that impact you? And like, what is that doing in the study to them, if anything? So I think that was probably another piece, but that's where our A11Y team came in and really helped.
Thank you. I have just a curious question. So you do research targeting people with disability. What is your approach to people who have disability but don't identify? Because there are a lot of those.
Yes. So actually, if you fill out this form, you're going to see. What we've done is we allow people, if they say, no, I don't identify, we have a follow-up question. It's like, all right, it's fine if you said no, but like, do you struggle with any of these day-to-day tasks? And then from there, we can kind of maybe gauge, especially with the help of our accessibility team, like what that disability might be. But even if it's not a disability, it's still a struggle that everyone might have. So that's kind of how we do it. That's good. Have any thoughts?
Yeah, our idea was to cast a very wide net, and as we know, lots of people don't consider themselves as having a disability because they just don't. And so that was one of one of our main considerations, and which is why we asked 2 of those questions.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Maddie, and I am a UX researcher. My question is, I love the goal of the 20% of participants, but I've personally had to do research on wheelchair accessible individuals, and unfortunately, due to things happening, now I am called in as the accessibility person, but not having experience with people who are hard of hearing, not having experience with people who are blind. So I'm kind of curious how you, when I was like, how do you, like in that 20%, are you focusing on a specific subsect of people with disability? Are you like, I don't know, is it a mix of different people? And how are you, I guess, designing for their sometimes contradictory needs?
Okay.
So I hate saying this, but I think as some of the researchers in the room might relate to, it kind of depends. I know. But I will say that, so when we get our objectives and we align on those objectives, we partner with our accessibility experts to say what disabilities might really struggle with this, what would they struggle with, who could really help inform that innovation. Now, we would love to do the research with every segment of the people with disabilities, but knowing that we need to be a little bit agile and a little bit more quick, that doesn't always work, but it does give us that really good and solid direction to consider if you, just going forward. Do you all have anything?
Yeah, the other thing too that's important is as we started this journey, we see the end goal of this is to have very specific disabilities for different flows that they're testing. But right now, we're starting with just disabilities. And as this grows and you start to flesh out some of the nuances of this, is now that will be sort of a next step. So this is a journey, which is why we call it a journey. So we got lots of room for improvement. So
I love what you guys are doing. This is really exciting. So thanks for sharing. I'm a UX researcher, and I understand the value and the importance of user testing with people using assistive technologies and their disabilities. You also mentioned, the ideation and the qualitative research that you're conducting. In what ways has that changed the way that you approach designing your products?
I missed the middle of that question. Yeah, sorry, I missed the middle of your question. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So in what ways are including people with disabilities in the qualitative portion of your research? How is that changing the way you approach your design of your products?
Got it. Yes, good question. So I think we've had multiple learnings, and you might have to touch on those because I know you've had it a lot. But I think, so one thing that we really are looking for in that research phase is finding those insights and like those moments that really matter and that can really make a difference. And so for people with disabilities, I think including those insights, and so making sure that we're capturing all of the needs for people with disabilities, but then also across the spectrum for others that don't have a disability, incorporating that is really making a difference across the board for everyone. So I think that's one way. I'm trying to think of a specific example.
Yeah, I do actually have a specific example I can tell y'all about. So if you imagine, sliders, when you are, if you don't have things you can type on each side, we did a study, not intending to find this, but what we found is somebody was like, if I have a motor disability, this is way too hard for me. And of course, we all know, I think, that sliders are just kind of annoying to do that with anyway. And it's like, well, yeah, duh. And then we had some stuff with, I can't like tell you like all the details, of course, but we had some other things that were, with modals and stuff that we found that were, it really just made it, where the close button is, where the X is. It made it easier for everyone, not just the people with disabilities. And we are really proving that out because our reports are reporting on the cross-section of where they intersect. And almost always so far, that intersection has been pretty consistent.
What kind of follow-up on your last one on the metrics you track for the report? What are some examples of business metric you track for the report so you can show the value of those research?
So I'm actually going to ask you if you can just speak up a little bit.
Yeah. What are some business metric that you keep track of to show the impact of the research?
I'll start with research perspective. I think, so for our user panel, the size of our user panel is something that we're keeping an eye on, and I think that trying to include at least 20% of users having a disability in our study, I think those are two like specific measurements that we're tracking and reporting back to the business that are really like getting a lot of the buy-in. And I think too, but as much as the business metrics matter, to be honest, I think it's really the power of like getting the stakeholders to observe, and like when we have, hearing feedback from our agents, for example, in the call center, when they cannot get through our system because it's so inaccessible, like when the headers are inconsistent and the screen readers, saying like starting with the paragraph and then the header and it's going across the page. I mean, it's crazy to watch that really happen and like watch an agent really try to get through it. So as much as we have business metrics, I think it's more powerful and we get way more buy-in when we really actually have like stakeholders involved in the process and watching and hearing like team members struggle or guests struggle when they cannot get through an experience because it's so inaccessible, and going to competitor sites and having a better experience.
On top of kind of the studies that you've done, what are some resources or maybe like books, talks that you guys have maybe shared in the team to kind of educate yourself more on people with disabilities, how they interact with different technologies and how you can better create products for them?
So there are a lot of different resources out there. There's particular groups that you can talk to. We really jumped in. I mean, we have the knowledge on how people, because we have people on our team with disabilities, so we have our own individual resource. So we're able to ask individually and then start from there. And then the researchers get involved and they learn. So it's certainly, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of resources out there, but I think it's just a matter of just jumping in and asking questions. So yeah, I can't really think of any.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Are you a researcher or? Yeah, I think that was an obstacle we had to get over we had to stop putting so much pressure on ourselves to understand like the disability and know all of the disabilities and just all of that type of thing, and just stick to being a researcher and digging in. And I think that was the biggest learning from our pilot, is we were so intimidated to jump in and do all of these studies and include people with disabilities. But what we truly learned is we're all humans, and they're going to forgive you if, I know in the first session that I facilitated with a blind agent, he was like, and I was like, well, what are you looking for? And he would just laugh at me because obviously he could not see. And I was like, I shouldn't have said that question. So, and I put so much pressure on myself to get everything perfect, but if you just stick to being a researcher, asking all of those questions, you learn so much in the practice and as you go. And if there is, a specific question we have about disabilities, that's where we really lean on our accessibility partners to help us.
So I've encountered this challenge in recruiting people with disabilities for UX research. I'm curious if you face the same, or how you overcame it or moved past it in order to, let's say, target those groups you were talking about who might be most impacted by a future feature, right? Maybe you want to try to recruit people, non-sighted folks, for example. In collecting that data in a screener, I found that that's really sensitive personal health data. You even have to follow some like HIPAA compliance in storing and collecting that. So how are you balancing wanting to, get feedbacks from those important groups of people, needing to directly ask them in order to like measure that metric of, are we reaching these people, while also balancing, I guess, the responsible and ethical collection of data?
So that is also one of those things that we kept we let it slow us down, and we were like, we were just scared to start because we didn't know how to ask the questions and if we were doing it the right way and if we were being ethical or, overstepping and asking personal, information. I think when we partnered with the consulting firm, like the agency, they kind of walked us through that and let us know, no, you're fine. You can ask these questions. Jill was also there to consult us, make sure that we're saying the right words, using the right phrases, of course. And so, again, we just had to try those questions that we came up with. And we've had iterations. We started and we had that question of, do you self-identify as having a disability? But then we had to take it another step because we know that people don't self-identify. And so we've, and we will continue to iterate, I think, our screener questions to make sure that we are casting a wide net and getting enough, getting people to answer the question. And so I think it's just something that we've continued to have conversations with these professionals that work with them day to day, but then also asking folks too. We have, like Jill said, we have folks on our team that have disabilities and just talking to them and seeing hey, is this okay? Does this script look okay? Are these the right questions to ask? And more times than not, it's fine. And these folks, again, we're all humans. So they know what we're truly trying to achieve. They know that our goals and our hearts are in the right place, right? Our passion's there. We want to get to that end goal. And they understand that and they do as well. So everybody, is on board and really wants you to succeed and make sure that you ask the right questions.
There's one. I think it's the last one. How are we on time?
Thank you. And thanks for the talk, by the way. This is great. Early on, you alluded to a pilot study where you discovered that you had an unsuccessful service animal experience. I thought that was really interesting because it would fall under something an experienced designer would want to solve, but WCAG compliance wouldn't necessarily provide the right solution. So I guess it's kind of a two-part question, which is one, how often does that happen in your research where you're oh, here's something we need to solve for, but it's not in the WCAG. And then I guess part two was, what was the solution? How do you create a satisfying service animal experience?
Yeah, so WCAG compliance is really that production. So we're already in production. It's farther down the line. And so our research is usually products that have not yet been created. It's not always the case, but generally. So it's always an ongoing awareness of our swim lane because we feel very passionate about user experience, but obviously our swim lane is accessibility and compliance in that way. So working with our research partners actually gives us an opportunity to share research or share user experience feedback, but lean into the research on it and say this has an impact on accessibility. And it's a tricky and a slippery slope a little bit for our team because we really do digital compliance accessibility, but we know that it's more than that. And so solution-wise, we just had one, it was in some experimental study that they did, and actually it was the pilot study. We had gotten some feedback about the flow on the mobile device, and one of those studies, one of those individuals ended up, it was compiled with a bunch of other research as well and went way up the chain. And what it came to find out is that impact was very, very early on in the funnel. So as you're looking for rooms on the Hilton website, the impact of that was impressive all the way down to booking. So in terms of conversion. So yeah, that was an example of user experience, but we were able to use some of our pilot studies to help really drive that home. So any way that we can make the experience better, we're okay with leaning into the accessibility team to say, well, accessibility says. So that's not always the case, but we're not ashamed to lean into that a little bit. So I think we're at time. So yeah, we invite you, if you have any other questions, we'll be around for a little bit, and connect with us on, do I have my little things? Oh no, I guess in the beginning. On LinkedIn if you want. We'd love to hear from you if you guys have more questions. We know that we looked forever to find people that were doing this, so we're more than happy to talk about it anytime. So thanks everybody.